Hey everyone, we're so pleased to have you here for a lovely talk. And I'd love to welcome the fantastic video games composer Marcus Hedges, who's going to be giving a talk here, giving us a look about how he approaches games music composition. So we're going to have time for a few questions at the end, so make sure you all get them down in the chat, which is here. I'll type a little here and there. But yeah, without further ado, I'll let Marcus introduce himself and his talk.
Hey everyone. So yeah, thanks for coming. And I am Marcus Hedges. I'm a composer for video games based in Brighton in the UK. And I've got some slides for you to get started. And then as we move through, I've got some examples of some of my work that I've done recently. And then a little bit of an overview on kind of like the typical process of how it works writing music for games, that like the process wise. So first off, you have to forgive me if I'm a little slow on the whole Discord side of things. We got it all working. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself first in terms of how I came to do what I do. Always been musical. Played the piano from a young age, and got to the point where everybody at school was sort of shooting off to university to learn, to go and, I don't know, be a doctor, and everybody was really sure of what they wanted to do, and that wasn't really me at all. I just knew that I liked playing the piano, and that was that. So I was flicking through a university prospectus, and I saw this degree for commercial composition and music tech. And what they said underneath there was that people were writing music for film, TV ads and radio ads and bits and bobs, and that sounded really interesting to me. So I went to university, on a bit of a whim. But it was there that I sort of discovered my love for orchestral music, typically in the shape of film scores. And I found out that people were writing music with computers, which also kind of blew my mind a little bit. So I did my degree, and when I finished, I also found out that people were writing music for video games in the same way that, people write orchestral scores for films. They were doing the same thing for video games, and this was kind of like a big light bulb moment for me. And I was like, this is what I want to do, because there's another thing that you should know about me, and that's I'm a massive gamer as well. I've been playing video games longer than I've been playing the piano, probably. So I started a little side project just to sort of practice, hone my craft, and I called that the Trend Orchestra. I did and still do orchestral arrangements of like my most sort of nostalgic video game music, Zelda, Super Mario, Sonic, that kind of stuff. And it served as a way for me to, I don't know, like hone my craft, build a little bit of a portfolio alongside the original music that I was writing. And yeah, like, I don't know, a couple months ago, past 100 million streams on Spotify, which was really cool. Still don't know how that happened, but here we are. And I still spend some of my time doing that too. And eventually I got my foot in the door in the games industry, and I started writing the soundtrack for my first video game, which was Ari and the Secret Seasons. Followed closely by Override 2, which was a kind of like it was like Tekken with robots. And quite recently, my most recent title is Century Age of Ashes, which we're going to talk a little bit about. And there's some examples that we can move on to in a little bit. So video game music. What is the difference? So film music is you write music for film in a linear fashion. It doesn't change. It plays through once, and there are hit points, and that's that. You're sort of, you've got what you're going to work with, and it's laid out in front of you, and it doesn't change. Whereas video game music, you can think of as dynamic, right? You've got to score somebody's decisions, somebody's you've got to compel somebody to do something, and you don't know when they're going to make those decisions. So we have to think about how the music's going to loop, etc. It's something that's very sort of fluid, and you have to consider other aspects, both film music and video game music, they're different. They share a lot of similarities, but there are a couple of characteristics that video game music has to consider. So there are two different types. I mean, this is the way that I like to think about it. So you've got your in-game music, you've got your loopable music for the gameplay, which is what I'm talking about when I say that, you know, that music has to go round and round without any breaks. Otherwise, you're gonna, you know, the player's gonna notice that, and that's not necessarily what you want. And then you have static music and loopable music for cutscenes. So, as you well know, with video games, there are cutscenes every now and again, and yeah, you know, you can approach those in a static fashion as well, because they don't necessarily need to go round and round. Then stingers are the shorter musical phrases that trigger in the game. For example, you know, time is running out, or one of your team members is down, or, you know, somebody just thrown a javelin and it's hit one of your team. I don't know, whatever. You get what I mean. And so, yeah, dynamic music. How do they work? So horizontal composition and vertical composition. So this is in regards to how you write the music. These are terminologies that I think you'll hear a lot when you're, you know, exploring the composition route. So horizontal composition is the one that I've explored most, and that is changing from one stereo mix to another, one track to another. Say the losing music track to the winning music track to the close match music track, right? And then you've got a vertical composition, which is turning stems, or you could think of another word for stems as just being like instrument groups on and off to simulate a new piece. E.g., you're in the game, the battle music is playing, but you're low on health, and all of the drums turn on, right? Or turn off. So, you know, each one has its pluses and minuses, and, you know, sometimes even people use a combination of the both. But yeah, so what's next? So the characteristics. So I'm going to talk about loops first. So in relation to like the gameplay, when considering loops, it's probably the most important characteristic, and it relates to immersion. And because these things have to repeat over and over, the smoother your loop is, the more chance you have of keeping the player invested and immersed in the gameplay experience. So it needs to be smooth, and it needs to be musical. You don't want, you know, you reaching the end of your track that you've written, and then the music kind of cuts out, or it changes vibe really suddenly, or musically, I don't know, it ends up in the wrong key. You don't want it to be noticed. That's key here. Then you've got keys. So for the more musical amongst you, you say you write something in C major, you know, keeping things in the same key means that any other material you add to the game, it means that musically you can switch between the 2 or 3 or 4, you know, pieces of music seamlessly. You're not going to have to do anything. You're going to make your life easier down the line by keeping things in the same key. If it does modulate, which can be a really interesting effect, like especially to make the piece feel like it's moving to a new place. How do you know, make your way back to the home key to make it sound musical, to make it loop without people noticing? Then you've got your transition points. And so this is really important too, because say you're winning the match, and suddenly you start losing, you don't want to have to wait to get to the end of that piece of music to start kicking into the losing music, right? Why would you want to be hearing the winning music when you're losing? So we specifically write these transition points into our music so that, you know, halfway through we can seamlessly musically transition into the losing music, right? Or seamless, you know, if you're good, seamlessly transition into the winning music. Or if the scores are tied, we can we can move into the close match music. And in the same fashion as the key, how does your BPM relate to your other material? You have to consider that you're going to be dynamically moving between different pieces of music. You don't want to pull the listener, the player, out of the experience by having a jarring change in BPM that doesn't make sense musically. So when it comes to once you've written the music, that how do we get these in the game? And we have stuff called middleware, which is the means for somebody to implement your music into the game to make it work with whatever's happening on screen, whatever decisions are being made by the player. Industry standard, to my knowledge, seems to be WYs and Fmod. I know that Unity and Unreal, even though they're game engines, they also have the means to implement music within them. And then there's things like Elias, which are people that are exploring alternative ways for composers to write their music for and implement it themselves. What I would say is that if you're interested in video game music, whether you learn WYs or Fmod or anything yourself, I think that the key is to know all that it can do. You don't necessarily have to be able to put that into action, because there are people out there who it's their entire job to implement the music side of things. But just knowing what they can do is going to be so helpful for you if you're writing music for the game. It's going to let you be far more creative within the realms of what's possible. So I do have an example of one of my tracks. It's for a game called Century Age of Ashes. If you don't know what Century is, it's basically a dragon dogfighting game. So you fight each other on the back of dragons. There's a bunch of different game modes. And there's like a death match. There's like capture the flag type things. But there's the one I'm going to show you today is called Spoils of War. And what Spoils of War is there are two teams, and there are a bunch of giant dragons in the middle carrying gold. And what you've got to do is just take the dragons down, grab the gold, take it back to your base, and bank as much gold as you possibly can before the time runs out. Team with the most gold wins. So let me just I'm going to try and change my screen share to a Logic session for you. Rather don't want to press the wrong thing here. If I just share, here we go. Let change windows. Right. So this is, so I basically, what I've done is these are the tracks that went into the game, right? And you can see that I've got 4 tracks here. And this is the music for the Spoils of War game modes. You've got your atmosphere, you're losing, you're winning, your close match. So I'm going to play you a little bit of each one, and we can talk a little bit about what's going on. And then we'll move through them and just go from there. So this is the atmosphere music. Basically, when we were starting the matches, and we were realizing that the quiet didn't really set the atmosphere very well, right? We were sort of flying off into battle, but it felt oddly silent. So we decided on writing an atmosphere track because we wanted this kind of undulating sense of tension. You're with your team, but nobody's winning, nobody's losing yet. So it's supposed to be very in the background. I've turned it up quite a bit so that you can hear it, but let me play a little bit for you. So you get the idea. That is the opening atmosphere, and you'll see that. I don't know if you noticed, but here in the middle there is a modulation. So musically, we're moving to a new key, and as I was saying before, it's important to consider that if you've moved to that key, you're going to go back to the start of the piece. So you need to consider musically how you're going to move back to that home key, and so that's what I've done in this little chunk here. Is musically I've moved it back to a place where actually we resolve to the home key, and it feels like it's supposed to go that way, but actually we're starting it again. Again, for the more musical among you, like adding a little modulation in there, it just helps it feel like it's progressing as a piece of music, going somewhere new, which is kind of useful if you're looping the same thing over and over again. You want to keep people interested. Let me move on to the losing music, which I've rather aptly colored red for losing. So this one, it was supposed to, we wanted it to really feel like a little bit bleak, but determined, right? You're losing. It's not great, but you really want to dig your heels in, and push for the win. I'm gonna not show you the entire one because we've got a few more of these to listen to and a little bit more to explain. But you'll see that they're all the same BPM, and they all modulate here in the middle, and they all move back to the home key. So I'll go do this one from about here. Right. So a little point I want to make here, about when I was talking about the different types of implementation program. Um, a lot of them, most all of them, will do the loop in a way that feels far more seamless than what you're hearing now. What you're hearing now is Logic just starting the piece of music again. But what you'll see in the implementation software like WYs or something like that is you get to hear this little ring out here, that lovely little reverberant thing, whilst the new bit of music starts. So it sounds so much more musical and fluid. Like you can't hear that that it's going back to the beginning. I feel that's important for you to know. So the winning music was an interesting one actually. At first I wrote this, really triumphant piece of music, and I had to revisit it. And the reason for that was because in the game mode, everything can turn on its head in a second, because they have this thing called I think it's called a jailbreaker or something like that, where essentially it's a bomb, and if one of the enemy team grabs that bomb, flies it to your base, it explodes all of the gold out of your base, and you have to collect it back up, or they can steal it from you. So you can be winning one moment and then losing the other. So I didn't want that. We didn't want the music to feel too much like you've already got it in the bag. So actually, it feels a lot more, not triumphant, but again, determined, and like we need to hold on to this. Like we're winning, but we're not quite there yet. There's a lot more choir. There's a lot. It's just, I don't know. It's you'll see what I mean. Okay, so that's the winning music. Very sort of, I don't know, beat your chest type war stuff. And then the close match music. This is what both teams will be hearing at the same time if the scores are more or less tied with each other, within a couple of 100 points. I remember that, I don't know if it's still the case, but I think the losing music kicks in if you're losing by 350 points. The winning music kicks in if you're winning by 350. And the close matches, I can't remember. But yeah, this one makes use of a slight, just it's similar, but there's a little bit more percussion driving the pace, which is we want people to feel a little bit like they, who's going to take the win, right? Who's gonna dig in and overcome the other team to take the lead. So you'll hear like there's shakers, there's a little bit of extra percussion. The vibe is slightly different. Let me just play a little bit of this for you. You get the idea. Okay, cool. So they are the tracks, and that is how they work in regards to what's going on in the game. Now, the most important, the main reason I showed this actually was because I wanted to show you how they can change between each other, and that's sort of to demonstrate the transition points. Consider that these are all the same BPM. They're all the same key. They all take the same structure as far as chords are considered. They all modulate in this middle bit here. And because of that, it means that we can kind of seamlessly change between them. So as always, the game will start with the atmosphere. And let's just, as an example, say that, I mean, what's that, 20 seconds in, which is very unlikely, but for the sake of demonstration, say we start losing, and the losing music kicks in. And then 30 seconds after that, the winning music kicks in because we turn it around, right? So let's listen to how these move between each other. I'll start it halfway through this. Right, so because they all have the same structure, we move from this one to losing to winning, and it works the other way around. It can work in any way, right? So we can just move from winning to losing. Right, and so these work because this modulation here musically in this little part, I've brought it back to kind of anticipate the home key here. So there's a little bit of tension, a little bit of like, oh man, we really want that resolution. Boom, it goes back to start. It feels like somewhere new, but we've actually been here the whole time. So this works in any order. In the game, you wouldn't need to change this often. Because you've only got a certain amount of time in the game, and sometimes the scores are tied for ages or whatever, but they're there and they're different layers, and it seems to work well, and we were pleased with how it turned out. So that's that. I also have a quick, just as a really short one, an example of some stingers. Bear with me, I'm just going to open a new Logic project which has the example in it. So I guess now I share again this one. So yeah, this is just a quick one just to show you how some stingers work. This one's quite a big stinger. It's for the last minute of the round. This example is a death match. The reason I call it a stinger is because it's only playing through once. We're not looping it. And then the implementation side of things, it has to decide. It has to look at the points and say, well, you've won, you've lost, or you've got a draw, right? And then finally, there's podium music where the three top performing dragon riders kind of, I don't know, show off a little bit. So what I'm going to show you is just how these kind of work. I'll play once through, and then I've actually got a video of it as well to show you how these work. So we're going to go 1 minute countdown, then we're going to go win stinger, then podium stinger. Okay, so I won't make you listen to the whole of that again, but what I wanted to show you was just how um, there's this build of tension here, and then we get that satisfaction of a win melodically, right? And that's kind of what you want. You just won. You want to feel satisfied with that. Makes sense. So on the flip side of that, the loss, we didn't want it to feel like you feel terrible about yourself. It's more like the vibe of we'll get them next time. So I'm going to turn this so I don't deafen you. Turn it down a little bit. So. Okay, and then equally the draw, there's supposed to be no satisfaction at all. It's supposed to be a bit like indifferent, and musically it kind of feels like that as well, in my opinion. So let me just. Okay, so yeah, that's supposed to feel a little bit like nobody gets any satisfaction there. Let me just quickly. I think I have to share a different screen, but I wanted to show you an example of it in game. I won't play it from the absolute thing, but I think it would be cool for you to see it in action. So I'm going to share a slightly. I'm just going to share the movie screen of it. Change windows. There it is. So you should be able to see this, hopefully. I'm going to go from like here. Oh wait, we want music, don't we? There we go. Let it be known that I tried ages to get this video where we actually won. So yeah, that's that really. Let me move back to my slides. Just here. Nobody look. Nobody look. There we go. So praying you can all see that. Yes. I just want to talk a little bit about the process. I guess it does vary from person to person, company to company, client to client. I can only tell you about my experience, and that is that I'll work closely with the audio lead, or if you're implementing the music yourself, the developer, and they will share with you a brief in terms of what they're expecting from the music. And then read the brief and ask as many questions as possible. This is what I'll do. I'll ask what the game is about. I'll ask what the client wants for the music, what they don't want. This is key also. You don't want to run too far in the wrong direction. You want to minimize any wasted time. Reference tracks, they can be good, providing you're not too heavily influenced by them and providing your client isn't too attached to them. And then what kind of visual stimulus can you get as far as concept art is concerned? I mean, I was super lucky as far as Century was concerned, because their concept art was unbelievable. And screen recordings of early test footage, but most importantly of all, getting a build of the game. You want to play it, you want to take as many notes as you can, get a feel for it, understand how the player is supposed to feel, really put yourself in their shoes, and all the time considering how the music might sound for them. So it's all about playing, understanding, taking notes, and interpreting that in your DAW, in Logic, in Cubase, whatever. So what I'll do is I'll play the game a bunch of times. I mean, I played Century for literally for hours and hours and hours. It cumulatively over my time writing the soundtrack. And I got some footage, and I just dropped it into Logic, and I started writing underneath that, because I was fortunate to have it had sound effects as well, so I could see how my music interacted with that too. With because it's one thing writing a piece of music when all you can hear is the music, but another thing when you've got dragons, roaring and flinging fireballs at each other and all that jazz. So it's it's an iterative process. Then once you've got something nailed down, it's all about the implementation side of things. So what I'll do is I will get all my stems together, and I will write a little page of A4, maybe take some screen recordings of how this is supposed to work musically, and send that to whoever's doing the music implementation. In my case, the audio lead. And then get it signed off by the client. I think it's hopefully, because again, you don't hit it out the park straight away all the time. And some music is quite subjective. Sometimes clients will have something slightly different in mind, and you just sort of have to be like, okay, that's if that's what you want, then that's absolutely fine. I'm going to take another run at it. But ultimately, I feel like that's an important thing to say. But other than that, that's it. That is the end of my little presentation here. Over to you guys if you have any questions or whatever. I'm all ears.
Marcus, that was brilliant. That was so cool.
My pleasure.
God, those tracks were so atmospheric and tense. That was brilliant.
That's the
We'll get
idea.
into yeah, no, it's amazing. It was I feel like, I've got the tiniest bit of like sort of music background, but it's
Uh-huh.
just amazing. I feel like how you can take the player on a journey just through those transitions, and they might not even realize like why they're feeling a certain way, but it's all through the music, and it's all a little bit psychological, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Oh, thanks.
Before we get started on some questions, I actually also just wanted to say a massive congratulations, because am I right in saying that the Marcus Hedges Trend Orchestra has got 100, is it 100 million Spotify streams?
Yeah.
Ah, that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't know how that happened, but I'm really pleased that that's the case, that people are listening to that stuff. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
awesome. I only wanted to bring it up because I was kind of laughing to myself, because I find the juxtaposition between kind of what you do for compositional work, and then also like your like High Roll Meditations album. I've been listening to quite a lot of that recently. I was like, oh my god, this is so intense compared to
Yeah,
the other
different,
things that I've
very
heard.
different headspaces. I
100%.
yeah, I wear a full suit of armor to write the music for Century.
Amazing, amazing. No, it's absolutely incredible. But yeah, I'd love to. We've got about 15 minutes to just to ask some questions, and we've had some great ones from the people in the chat. But I'll read them out.
Okay.
One thing that I just kind of wanted to ask from my side, though, is that like Into Games were kind of about making the industry more sort of accessible for everybody,
Mhm.
and then I just wondered if there's kind of any free tools or resources that you'd recommend for people that's for anybody who's just kind of starting out in music composition, like any DAWs or VSTs or
Mm,
anything
mm.
that you'd recommend off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a website called Piano Book, which is which is a community where people they sample their own instruments, and they make their own virtual instruments. So, say somebody's got a flute that they really like, and they think that it has a really interesting sound, and they turn that into a virtual instrument, and then they put it up there for everybody else to use. um it's there's such a wealth of stuff on that
Ah, it's
website
awesome.
alone. And then, yeah, again, like Spitfire's labs is a similar sort of vibe in terms of free stuff. um uh I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I think instruments was the first thing that popped in there.
No, 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 that's awesome. I've got like a piano, just like a piano sample from Piano Book, and it was called
Mm.
like Mum's 1920s piano, and it made me cry because it was like this guy who'd sampled his mum's like really old rickety piano, but it had such character about it. It
Oh
was
man,
lovely.
that's so cool. Yeah, because they have all
Brilliant.
these little stories, don't they? It's
Mm.
yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fantastic resource. Thank you so much.
That's right.
So we've had a couple questions come in. Somebody said, you touched on it briefly, but somebody said, how close do you usually work with the rest of the audio team, i.e., audio directors to tech sound designers? Could you give us a little bit of insight about how you work with those kind of guys?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So in my experience, it's been very much with the audio lead. So he's kind of like the middleman. He's been interpreting what the client wants, and it's cool because he knows music too. So that it's like
Mm,
that kind of the language we use is it makes sense to one another. So I've worked mainly with that guy, and he is the one that kind of makes sure that everything sort of synergizes, I guess, in terms of sound effects, and he takes that role.
mm.
It's something that I feed into. I'm like, it's something that I need to be aware of. But ultimately, he has the say in that side of things. If that answers the question, I think.
Yeah, 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 no, for sure, for sure. That makes so much sense.
Mm.
We've got a couple of other questions coming through. This is a good one. Somebody said, I was curious on your approach when deciding either vertical or horizontal composition used in game. What composition do you take before starting to write music using those methods? If that makes
Uh,
sense.
I think so. I mean, I gravitate towards the horizontal method because I guess it's the closest one for me. I don't know. I like thinking of everything in one straight line,
Mm,
which, you know, it's not necessary. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I just weirdly gravitate to that way. So when they asked me, "Can you do the Spoils of War music?" I knew that for me meant not one track where I turn the drums off, where I turn the strings off, blah, blah. I wanted four different versions of that one track, right? So that I could, like, I don't know, play around within the realms of that structure. So I think it's just how I enjoy writing. Um, and having that sort of control over the thing. Like, I set it that way, it stays that way, and then if we want to change game state from winning to losing, I can have control over how that winning music stays that way and plays through, as opposed to turning drums off on
mm.
again and strings off and on again. So yeah, that's why I like that, I think.
No, that's cool. Do you find that it is still pretty flexible in terms of, if the client comes back and says, actually, we pictured it more like this, do you find that it's easy to then go back and
Mm.
kind of redo some bits?
Yeah, 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 definitely. It's I think it's more agreed early on as well, with regards to, horizontal or vertical. Like, you have to consider how that's going to work with the game. So if it might be a little bit more, there might be a little bit more to sort of do if you were to change from horizontal to vertical, because things would work slightly differently. But if a client comes back and says, actually, can you just change this section a bit? It's not such a big deal.
Sure, 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 sure. No, that's brilliant. That makes loads of sense.
Mm.
Here's a slightly different one. There was somebody who asked, have you ever done composition for a rhythm game? Or if not, how would you adapt your approach towards that kind of genre?
Ooh, no, I haven't. That would be a really interesting one, actually. The way that I mean, I'm assuming that those games work. It's what I was talking about in terms of making sure that everything is consistent with its BPM. If you can think of it as like a grid. So rhythm-based games, I'm I'm 99% sure that that is the crux of it. You know, you need to be within a certain BPM, and that needs to speak to the game. I think I mean, to me, I think definitely you'd have to do vertical composition for that, because a lot of
Sure.
them, they turn on, you know, was like Guitar Hero, right? You get a line successfully working, and that line continues on, but you need to do the drum track, or you need to do like the extra, you know, the bass or whatever. So they're very much vertical compositions.
They're quite like I feel like they're very audio programmer heavy, those kinds of games as well. So it's
Oh
a
yeah.
lot more interaction between the two. Would it be something that you'd be interested in doing down the line, do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like a great challenge.
Does sound pretty cool. It does sound pretty cool. Somebody else asked, they're not an audio person exactly, but being an amateur singer, I'm curious, how would you handle a cappella pieces for games? Have you done any kind of more a cappella or like vocal heavy tracks
Um,
before?
I haven't actually. I haven't. I A cappella again. It's if you boil it down to you know, I obviously use a lot of orchestra, but take all that away and say I just use voices. This the key components that I spoke about, the characteristics, they still stand as long as those you know, say your 4-part harmony, whatever, your four voices, as long as they're the same BPM, they move, you know, the same key, they loop nicely. It's the same approach. So I think, I mean, I mean, again, that would just be a really interesting thing to try and see how you could hit different emotions and bits and bobs with that sounds like a great challenge also.
Yeah, there was a couple bits in those tracks that you showed us that where it was like sort of more choral and it sounded
Mm.
lovely, you know, it blended really nicely. So
Yeah,
yeah, it sounded great.
thank you.
Um, so Jero has just asked, are there any technical reasons why you use Logic Pro? Do you feel like there are any pros or cons between DAWs from a VGM composer's perspective?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, so the reason I use Logic was because that's what I started on, you know, like 10 years ago, and I'm too scared to change to anything else. I do love it. It's just they more or less they all do the same thing. Um, I haven't tried them all. I know that Cubase is also very popular. Um, but as long as you can get some footage in there, as long as you can, you know, bounce bits and bobs out and you can export, you're good to go. I know people that use Fruity Loops and Digital Performer, and you know, there's a lot out there, and they all do more or less the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, that makes loads of sense. There
Mm.
was a question that I had actually. I just wondered what your kind of your first steps into this field were after coming out of education. You know, did you
Mhm.
because one of my other questions was how do you kind of conduct freelance and client work, right? So was it like a
Mm.
lot of networking after you came out, or
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question actually. So so when I came out of uni and with a pretty decent mark, and rather naively thought I'd fall into a music job. That didn't happen. It was a bit of like, okay, right. So I've got to kind of uh, I don't know, create my. This was 10 years ago as well, and this was like, okay, I need to create um, my own opportunity here. And I was in that position where you need the experience to get the job to get the experience. um and so yeah, absolutely, speaking to people that are doing things and in the same industry and making friends and all that stuff, that's so true.
Mm,
I'm even still learning that now, to be honest with you. It's making legitimate, you know, not going for the hard sell or anything, like just making friends in the industry is like the best thing you can do. For me, I ended up, it's quite an obscure way that I landed my first game. I did I did I'm a massive Zelda fan, and I did the I did the whole Ocarina of Time soundtrack as like an orchestrated thing. And I was doing other little bits and bobs. I did some like TV ads, and I did some web ads, and I knew I wanted to get into games. And anyway, I saw a I saw a, I think it was an article where somebody was talking about this game that looked like Zelda. It was likened to Zelda, and I was like, oh man, like I would love to do something like Zelda. And so I ended up getting in touch with them. I was like, guys, I've just done this 50 track Ocarina of Time like orchestration, and like I really want to do some original music. Can I like pitch for you or something? And they were like, yeah, go ahead, why don't you pitch for us? And the rest is history, really. They really liked my pitch, and I landed the gig. So that's how I got in, and then from there it was a recommendation type thing. I got recommended I got the opportunity to pitch, right? So people reached out to me, oh, we heard you do music, do you want to try and pitch for this? And amongst other composers, and it's one of those things where it's like if you do well, and you kind of again, music is subjective. If you're lucky enough to be what the client wants, then you land the gig, and you go from there.
Sure. That makes loads of sense. So it's
Mm.
really, unfortunately, and unfortunately, in some cases, it's really kind of striking out on a limb, and then it's who you know, right?
Mm, mm,
That's
mm.
brilliant. That's really cool. I'm just kind of conscious of time. If anybody has any last minute questions, please do feel free to pop them in the chat quickly. It's kind of funny actually, because when I was at uni, oh god, 2 or 3 years ago now, and I was listening to your Majora's Mask,
Oh
some
yeah,
of your Majora's Mask tracks while I was doing my dissertation. I was like, man, this is really good. I like
that's
this
awesome.
because I'm a big old Majora's Mask fan. So it
Nice,
was
nice.
brilliant, really cool. But yeah, otherwise, actually, well, there's one kind of one more question that I can ask if just for a minute. I was just really curious, like, how have you ever sort of played in orchestras before, or did you grow up kind of surrounded by them? I just feel like you have such a great kind of knowledge of orchestral texture and stuff like that. And I just wondered how you gained that, or was it just something that you figured out as you went?
Yeah, it's a weird one. So when I got to uni, I didn't realize how much I liked film scores. Like I would always go to the cinema on my birthday when I was a kid, like always watched all the Harry Potters as for each. They would always come out on my birthday. Like I don't know, it's just a big deal hearing all that orchestral music. So when I realized that, and then I also found out that people were making, like, you could actually get virtual instruments that sounded pretty convincing.
Mm.
I got really obsessed with it. I didn't really have any. I'm completely self-taught as far as that's concerned. I haven't played in an orchestra or anything like that. I've just practiced a lot. And yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of I fell in love with it a bit.
Oh, that's awesome. No, it really sounds like you've kind of come from like a very, very orchestral background and stuff. So that's awesome. That's really cool
That's
to
good.
know.
The
Um,
facade continues.
no, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's very cool. Oh, we've had one last minute question come in from
Okay.
Birdie here. So Birdie says, do you have an idea of how long it took you to reach a place where you felt comfortable enough with how to use your door? Um, doing pretty much all of the different kinds of things you would want to do in Logic feels less frustrating, and more like you feel motivated to keep going and keep making more stuff in Logic. Like I guess it's like, do you ever get to a point where you're less like fighting with your door? Like I sometimes feel like I'm fighting the program.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's yeah, that's a really good question. I'm still I've been using it, I mean, geez, like 12 years I've been using Logic, and I'm still
mm,
figuring out new shortcuts and ways of working, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Workflow is like another thing that I'm really kind of passionate about. I've got all sorts of, I've got a little stream deck here. I've got my
mm,
iPad hooked up to it. So there are a lot of ways that you can streamline stuff that gets frustrating, Um, it's one, I mean, it's mildly, ever so slightly off topic, but one really cool thing that you can do is go into your preferences, go into the key commands and just search around, see what the
Mm.
program can do. Because I did that and I was like, oh my God, like I didn't realize that I've been spending, I don't know, 2 or 3 seconds every single time doing this when I can do it with one click. And you measure up those 3 seconds over the course of 10 years and you literally save days and days of your life. Um, so it's just understanding what it can do and streamlining that process, and you'll feel a lot less frustrated.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I think with a lot of games development programs, like they're there to work for you, right? Not not for you to be
Yeah.
like constantly fighting against. No,
Yeah,
that so
yeah, yeah.
that's awesome. Thank you so much.
That's
I think
okay.
that's about kind of all we have time for. You've been absolutely brilliant, Marcus. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, my
Um,
pleasure.
for everybody else, I've linked the Marcus Hedges Trend Orchestra up above. But is there anything else you'd like to plug, Marcus, or to direct
Um
everybody to? No worries if
Not
not.
not particularly. I'm working on a little original album of superhero music at the moment. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Trend Orchestra on Twitter, and I post all sorts of work on there as the best place to follow me.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Actually, a superhero album sounds amazing. Sounds awesome. But thank you so much. You've been absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to everybody who's here, I just think it would be nice to mention that we've also got another audio panel next week, where we're going to be joined by some of the folks from Hot House Music, and they'll be discussing the best ways to get into games audio and focusing on some of the really cool projects that they work on. And we'll be doing a great Q&A at the end as well. But that's about all we've got time for now. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks again, Marcus.
No worries. Take care. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye bye.